Welcome everybody to the webinar, How to Trust Your Data, the Microsoft Purview demo. My name is Mark Warnes. I'm an architect here at Cocho, and my colleague from Microsoft today is Liz Cox, who's a senior product manager within the Purview team. So I'm going to be kind of your host today in terms of driving through the top and tailing the webinar, but Liz is going to be the one who's going to be talking more about Purview in depth. Just a quick mention then about Cocho as ourselves, who we are. We are a Microsoft partner with a range of specializations across what Microsoft offer. In particular, I'm going to highlight, information protection and governance, which is the one that really pertains to Purview itself. Cocho is also a member of the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association, so we're very much involved with talking with Microsoft and giving feedback on the products and the industry as a whole in terms of what things are going on and what things we need to be addressed. We have a range of services that we offer, from professional services to managed services around security, compliance, and identity, and we are obviously a valued partner with Microsoft in terms of working with them to provide all these solutions, including Purview and beyond. Yes, as I say, we do identity in terms of dealing with zero trust identity and making sure that you are protecting your organization when people are logging in and signing in. We will do stuff with Sentinel in terms of leading security operations with a managed SOC service that's available as well, but using that to automate threat protection and responses. We help with modernizing your Azure platform, or moving to Azure and hosting infrastructure and managing solutions within that, and also working around securing your endpoints, securing the identity, securing all the stuff and your data that is important for your organization. So as much as possible, we'll help you, with your Microsoft solutions in terms of making sure that you're getting as much value as you can from those. And that includes Purview, which is obviously what we're going to be talking about mainly today. So let's start with just addressing some of the challenges that organizations have around data governance. And perhaps, one of the big ones is the fact that we have so much data across, different platforms now. We've got all various cloud services. Some organizations obviously still have stuff on premises where, data is being created and stored, and the vast range of SaaS platforms that are now available. This means, having that visibility across the data in all these different systems and the types of data you have there is a particularly big challenge. Is knowing what data you have. There's a term called dark data that we'll often talk about data that people do not necessarily know what it is. It's being created by your users, but what actually is it? What sort of types of information does it contain? And therefore, is it quite sensitive or not? Is it something we need to worry about? There are, of course, a number of requirements, as I'm sure you're aware, from GDPR, HIPAA, ISO 27001, all these different regulations that demand, how some of this data, specifically sensitive data, how that is handled, and how what audit you have to do over that data to make sure you understand it. And again, there is that challenge then around making sure that you're aware of what you have and what your responsibilities are for handling that data, being able to demonstrate what you're doing, and that you have controls in place or systems that will allow you to protect data and respond if there is some sort of incident. There are, of course, lots of risks holding this data, but none more so from actually your users themselves, in terms of how they access and use that data within your environment, or even how they share it elsewhere. Do they classify it correctly? Do they share it inappropriately? Do they actually deliberately try and take data out there? That's obviously a risk too. And that can, of course, lead then to breaches. And if you have that breach and you have to report things, or it ends up in the news, then there's the damage to your reputation that could affect your organization in the future. And then if we can also think about, in terms of the data that we have, what sort of quality has it got? have we got duplication? Have we got oversight of who is responsible for certain data? There's the idea of data owners and data stewards. Are you clear about who actually is responsible for maintaining the quality of the data throughout your organization? It's not just people creating documents, it's the data you have sitting in structured sources such as databases and the other platforms. And that data is obviously being used to generate your own data products and to develop your business. So making sure that that data is of the right quality and that you have the right oversight of it is extremely important. And these challenges is where Purview comes in. Purview is trying to handle a lot of these challenges and make it easy for you to control your data and have that oversight and have that control. And a lot of you may be familiar with this slide or variations of it, but really there are kind of three sides to Purview now. Those of you who have seen me on previous webinars or may have met me at the summit when I've presented before know that we often talk about data security as one of the primary things that Purview does, and it is within the Microsoft 365 space in particular. Things like data loss prevention and information protection. These are key things that allow you to improve the security of your data and try and avoid oversharing or unauthorized access. And there's also the risk and compliance posture side, where you're using things like e-discovery or data lifecycle management to either discover data and investigate things, or manage that data within Microsoft 365 and be sure that you are meeting regulatory requirements by looking at the various improvement actions that Compliance Manager could give you and showing you your compliance score, which is a bit like Secure Score, but it's the Purview version, if you like. But the area perhaps where I know I certainly don't usually speak about within webinars or presentations is the data governance side of things. And so that's where we're going to concentrate today, looking at how we can use the data governance tools within Microsoft Purview to unlock the value of the data that you have, to give visibility to what's there, to give more oversight for your data consumers about what sort of data they should be using or have access to, what that data represents, and the quality of that data. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to Liz from Microsoft, who's going to start leading the presentation now. He's going to take us through and hopefully show us a few things. And I'll say I will go off into the background and answer any questions you may have, in which case, Liz, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. So I'll go ahead and share my screen as well. And like Mark said, I'm going to go ahead and take you folks through. Mark did a great job kind of framing up sort of the use case around data governance and also how that sits within Purview. But I have just a few additional framing slides here to kind of build on that message. And then we're actually going to spend a lot of our time jumping into the solution. I think that's the best way to show what the Purview data governance capabilities can do. And so I'll take you through kind of the core use cases in the Data Governance Unified Catalog portal for Purview. And then I know there's a bunch of you folks who joined live as well, and then I'm sure some folks will tune in on the recording, but definitely want to make time for questions at the end. So I'll certainly leave time for questions at the end here. So a lot to get through. I'll jump right in, and Mark will be monitoring the Q&A as well as I go through. So if anything is burning, feel free to put that in the chat as it comes up. But, Mark was talking about a lot of the challenges that come with, that data security, data governance, and data compliance. And this is really key because digital transformation in today's world is not optional. That has been, true for probably the last 15 years, but especially with the rise of AI, that's particularly true. And data is the fuel for this digital transformation, and it's the fuel for your AI as well, and something we talk a lot about internally at Microsoft, and I talk to a lot of organizations about, is the fact that your AI is only going to be as good as your data. So you want to be able to responsibly govern and responsibly activate the data that is within your estate. And, it sounds easier said than done. I'm sure a lot of you folks are familiar with all the different challenges, but really interesting. When we've talked to a lot of different organizations, we found out that 74% of organizations are struggling to secure their data. 68% are struggling to activate their data. And when I say activate, I mean get that business value out of the data. So it's one thing to secure it, make sure you're compliant, totally lock down everything. But that's not really the end use case we want either, if it means that people in your business are not able to get value out of the data. At that point, it's kind of like, what's the point? So striking that balance of activation, but doing it responsibly. And then and Mark was talking about this, the ever-changing regulatory landscape. We found that 47% are struggling to adhere to those changing regulations. And then, of course, with AI, there's a whole set of regulations and ever-changing regulations in that landscape as well. But why has this really been so hard for organizations? And I know Mark kind of outlined some of those challenges, and specifically in the data governance space, what we see is a lot of fragmentation. So you might have a tool for your master data management, you might have a separate tool for your data quality management, but actually that tool only works for certain data sources. You have to have another data quality tool to work for your other data sources. And you might have a whole nother set of tooling for your data catalog, or maybe even have several data catalogs. I've worked with organizations that have up to 12 different data quality tools. So all this fragmentation really creates a lack of transparency and making it really hard to understand what is going on overall with your data estate. Additionally, data governance is a place where we see a lot of labor-intensive tasks, where we're dealing with these massive data estates. And I always think it's funny because with data governance, part of what we're trying to do is enable automation and AI. But at the end of the day, we are having to do a bunch of labor-intensive tasks of defining glossary terms, defining critical data elements. And so where can we actually leverage AI to make our lives easier when it comes to data governance is a key area. And then the other challenge is, what model of data governance is going to work for your organization? And we've seen a lot of organizations try a model of centralized governance, where the central data office is essentially responsible for all the data governance throughout the organization. This is extremely difficult to scale, and it also means the central data office couldn't possibly have kind of the business context and business understanding as folks embedded in those different business teams are. So we'll talk a little bit more about different models of data governance in a bit, but that has definitely been a challenge, is finding that right model of data governance. And then this last piece around technical interfaces. Historically, a lot of data governance solutions have been designed with solely the IT persona in mind. And we love our IT teams. They may be the ones who are working to onboard the data sources. They may be involved in data governance, but they are not the only people involved in data governance. And you really need to bring the business context to data governance. And as such, you need to have tooling that has the business use cases in mind and is built for business users. And so that has been a big pain point in the past as well. And so I'm not going to talk too much about this because Mark kind of covered it so beautifully, but Microsoft Purview, this is just a slightly different kind of version of what Mark was showing you folks, is this suite to help you secure and govern your data estate across these solutions of data security, data governance, data compliance. And today we'll be mainly focused on that data governance piece, but I did want to call out that all these solutions are also built on top of these rich shared platform capabilities that help us onboard our data sources, help us classify those data sources to then apply some of these different solutions across them. And we've really brought it together in a unified way because, where data security and data compliance in the past was solely focused on the M365 ecosystem, now we've extended some of those capabilities to the structured data estate, things like Fabric and Azure and AWS, as well as to activity around your AI apps and agents. And so I just wanted to call out that this is why we're unifying these solutions more than ever, because for all your different workloads, you're going to be needing these three of data security, data governance, and data compliance. And you'll see additional capabilities weaving together these solutions going forward as well. So in terms of data governance, really our goals have been to help you confidently activate your data and accelerate that value creation. And kind of our three pillars based on those challenges I outlined were: we want to make it AI powered to drive dramatic efficiency improvements. We want to make it business friendly because data governance is a team sport. Different people throughout the business need to be involved in data governance, and it needs to be business friendly to help you ultimately get business value out of it. And then it needs to be unified and actionable. Everything should be unified in one tool. Even if you have a multi-cloud data estate, being able to view all your data in one place and govern it all in one place is extremely important. And at Microsoft, we've had kind of our own evolution internally and what products we offer with data governance. And this kind of represents the last 10 years or so at Microsoft. But just to kind of quickly go through this, our first kind of foray into data governance was the Azure Data Catalog, which was just essentially an inventory system for your data that existed within Azure. And then we matured into what is called Azure Purview. Today, we refer to this as the Classic solution. So Azure Purview Classic, which is still a supported solution out there today. And this was much more mature than the Azure Data Catalog. We realized, hey, we need to support multi-cloud estates. We need to support third-party data sources so you can view all your data in one place. We need to support a lot of advanced capabilities rather than just inventorying the data. We need to have more comprehensive metadata extraction and lineage so you can view where the data is traveling. And this was a really kind of complete platform, but it was exactly that. It was just a platform. So it didn't have a lot of grounding in the business uses of responsibly activating your data. So what a lot of organizations would do is leverage this rich platform. We make all our APIs available to build their own data governance solutions on top of that. But that is a lot to ask when you're trying to get involved with data governance, to also have to build your own data governance solution. And we were running into that internally at Microsoft as well, which is why I think starting last fall, it became generally available. We launched the new and improved version of Microsoft Purview, which is a fully software as a service solution that supports your multi-cloud unified data governance needs. And with this, when we designed this new solution, we really wanted to make sure we enabled a federated model of data governance, which is what we landed on at Microsoft after trying different models of data governance and what we recommend to the organizations we work with. So on the left, we talked about it a little bit. You have that centralized model of data governance where there's a central data office, and they're defining the data governance solution for the entire, they're defining the data governance strategy rather for the entire organization and putting that into practice. So you might have some of those hardened controls, but it is not tweaked for the individual needs of different portions of the business. And there's no sense of agility for those different business units. On kind of the other end of the spectrum, we have that decentralized model, which is all about local teams, local decisions, figuring out how to make data governance work for them. But this can be a lot harder to stay on top of some of those security and compliance needs and kind of quality needs as well. And we've also found that there's less efficiencies here than you would think, because there's no practice of best practice sharing across these different teams in the decentralized model. That's why we've landed on a model of federated data governance, where you have a central data office that defines the overall standards and expectations for data governance across the organization, but then can delegate to individual teams that can make data governance work for their particular business unit and can be accountable for the governance of that portion of the data estate. And then last slide, I think, before I actually jump into the demo itself, but I did want to just mention the key personas that we have designed the solution for, because it is, a unified solution, and that means we've designed it for a number of personas as well. And we know every organization is a little bit more complicated than this, but kind of at a high level, we want to enable data consumers to quickly and intuitively find the data that they need for their business use case. We want to empower data owners and data stewards to collaborate to build out that meaningful catalog for data consumers and give them the business context they need. And then we want to enable the central data office to monitor the overall health of the data estate and establish trust through capabilities like data quality. That's kind of data governance, Purview data governance in a nutshell, but I'm going to put this actually into practice by going through a demo and showing you folks what this actually looks like. So if I just pull up my data governance, so this is the Purview Unified Catalog. We're within Purview and we've navigated to Unified Catalog. This is where a lot of your data governance is going to be taking place. I also want to call out this related solution here of Data Map. That's that platform component. That's where you'll go to onboard your data sources so that they can then be governed in Purview Unified Catalog. Also want to call out while I'm on the homepage that if you are just getting started, we have a number of getting started materials for you here. These are click-through interactive tutorials. So as you go through these topics, you can launch the tutorial and it'll take you step by step through how to do these key use cases. And we have a number of videos and direct links to our documentation as well. Over on the product side, you can see that we have 3 main buckets here. And these roughly map to those personas that I was just calling out on that last slide. So discovery is where your data consumers are going to come to discover the data that they need for their business use case. Catalog management is where data owners and data stewards are going to collaborate to build out that meaningful catalog. And it's also where the central data office is going to come and delegate out the different portions of the data estate that they want those data owners and data stewards to govern. And then health management is where the central data office, as well as data quality stewards, are going to monitor the overall health of the organization, set up and monitor data quality, and get a sense of where things like data quality or access management might be breaking down through things like data observability. And so I'm going to try to give you folks a quick look at some of the core workloads in these 3 buckets. And so we'll start kind of with the end in mind from the perspective of a data consumer. So data consumers are going to spend a lot of their time in what we call the data products catalog. This is where they'll come to find data that they need for their business use case. So if I come in here, I can type in natural language, I need sales revenue data. And then what I'll see returned for me is a curated list of data products. Data products are logical collections of data assets that the data owners and data stewards have chosen to organize and make available for data consumers. They've chosen that these are the assets that are consumable, most consumable for the data consumers. So I'll come in and I'll say, okay, global sales revenue for calendar year 2023. This looks like what I'm interested in. And if I click into that data product, I have a number of things I can see here. I see the description and use cases associated with this data product. I see what governance domain this is associated with, which we'll talk more about governance domains in a bit. I see the overall health of the data quality score, that's out of 100. I see any additional documentation or terms of use I should read, who this is meant for. And then I see the data assets. And again, if I had just seen a flat list of non-curated data assets in the beginning, that would be hard for me to interpret as a data consumer. But now within the context of a data product, I have a sense of what these data assets may mean and how they may be helpful for me. And if I want more information, I can click in and get a breakdown of the schema, for example. I also see the glossary terms associated with this data product, and glossary terms are there to give me more business context around what this data is and how it can be used. So for example, revenue reporting here, that is what I'm looking to do with this data product, so I know that I'm on the right track. I'll also see the critical data elements associated with this data product, as well as the contacts. After consuming all that information, if I decide that this is a data product that I want to get access to, I can go ahead and click this request access button. Now this form is somewhat configurable, we'll see on when we're in catalog management, but for this particular data product, I see manager approval is required. That means that my manager will get an email when I send this request access. And then I see that a privacy reviewer is also required in this case. So they'll also get an email when I request access here. Seems like my privacy reviewer may have left. Here we go. And then I'll also have to select what purpose I'm using this data for. And then the business justification. I'll say I'm creating an LT revenue report. The last step then is to agree to all these different terms of use. So these can be anything from third-party agreements, terms of use, trainings I have to go through, or just guidelines. So here I'm not able to make data copies, a number of terms of use and third-party agreements, usage policies, training I have to go through to get access to this type of data. And anything that you need to put in here to make sure that you're governing this data appropriately. Once I've agreed to all of those, I can send this access request. So that's what it looks like when the data consumer has a clear idea of the type of data that they need. But if they're also just looking to get a sense of what the data estate looks like in the organization, they can come to Enterprise Glossary and get a sense of how these glossary terms are defined in the organization and what data might relate to them. They can do the same for critical data elements as well as OKRs, objective key results. So if I, as a data consumer, have a specific business objective I'm driving, I can come in and view this business objective and see the key results that are tracking that, as well as the data that is associated with that. Maybe this is data that I'm going to want to get access to. So that's what it looks like to have a well-curated data catalog. But let's look how we got there by going over to catalog management. So this all starts to come together in what we call governance domains. Governance domains are meant to mirror the structure of your organization. So they're generally going to be kind of these evergreen business groups. So different kind of functions like sales, finance, marketing, human resources. Occasionally, maybe a wide regulatory category like sustainability, or in some cases, a particular project, there may be a governance domain spun up around that. And governance domains are important because this is the key point of federation. So the central data office will help define the governance domains, again, to mirror the structure of your business, but then they'll delegate out governance of these different governance domains. So here in roles, I can assign governance domain owners. You're essentially saying these are the people who are going to be accountable for the governance of this portion of the data estate. You can also assign your data product owners. These are going to be the people who are going to build those data products and decide what data assets they want to make consumable for the business users. And then data stewards who are going to create and update business concepts to help bring additional business context to the data and how the data should be used. So if I go back to details, I'll see here the core business concepts that are associated with this governance domain. So we have data products, glossary terms, OKRs, objective key results, and then critical data elements. Critical data elements are slightly different. These will map to physical columns in your data assets, and those are the pieces of data that you want to govern with the highest quality of care. So we'll see in a bit how you can apply policies at all these different levels. So you might want to, for example, if there's anywhere with an address, you might want to apply a certain set of policies around that, again, because it's going to be governed with the highest quality of care. Now, if I go to data products, and I'll choose a data product that's in draft to continue working on. And the first step with a data product is you're going to want to understand what business use cases you're trying to meet and put in a rich description and use cases. And of course, this is a bad example because this one is in draft, but that's kind of that first step. And then you'll add your data assets. And this is about figuring out which data assets are most consumable and most reusable across your organization. What are the ones you want to elevate and activate as part of data products? And we have a find and select option here for all the data assets across your organization, and a lot of different filters available to help you filter down what those data assets are that you want to select. And then you'll also see here, this is something in preview today, but looking to put out soon, is this Get Suggestions button, which is actually an intelligent AI-powered way to add data assets to your data product. You can also add your glossary terms here. You can add your OKRs, and then critical data elements, of course, will come from the data assets that you add to this data product. Once I'm getting ready to publish this data product, what I'll do is I'll manage the policies on this data product. And this is what's going to feed that request access experience that we saw from the perspective of the data consumer. So I'll see here that I can say what purposes are appropriate for accessing this data. I can go add an access time limit. I can add specific people who should be approving this request, and also denote if a manager approval is required and/or a privacy and compliance review is required. And then I'll add my attestation. And again, these can be guidelines for using the data. They can be trainings that have to be done to get access to this data, or they can be kind of terms of use, third-party agreements. And then I mentioned before that you can actually apply policies on a lot of different levels. So you can apply policies to your data products, you can apply policies to your glossary terms, to your critical data elements, and you can also apply policies at the governance domain level. So if there is just a set of standards that anything that's in the sales governance domain should have in place, you can do that as well. And so all these different ways to apply policies really help you scale your practice of data governance. And at the end, the data product request access form will just be a union of all of those policies. So in this case, this is where I'm configuring policies on the data product, but I can also view the inherited policies that are associated with this data product. So I see here that there's already a set of policies applied to the sales governance domain. And then I also have some critical data elements that are part of this data product. And so there's a set of policies associated with and applied to these as well. Once I've done all that, I can preview the request form. And again, this will be the union of the policies I've configured on the data product, as well as all those inherited policies. So that's the basic look at the catalog management section of the unified catalog. And so then the last piece is this health management section. And a few things I want to show you here. I'll first take a quick look at data quality. This is measuring the overall quality of your data. And we have some highly configurable options for you here in terms of where you want to apply data quality. And we have a set of out-of-the-box rules, as well as an experience for you to define some of your own custom rules. So you'll see here, I'll go into a data product again. And I'm going into a data product because what we have support for today is running data quality on data assets that are connected to a data product. So these are the data assets that are going to be consumed across your organization, and that's where you want to run your data quality. We're also adding the ability to run data quality on data assets that have one or more critical data elements associated with them. So if I go into the data asset, I'll see that I have a few different options around data quality. So often the first step is running a profile of the data. So this will do a sampling of this particular data asset to understand more in depth the schema and what some of the values associated with this data asset are. This is helpful to begin to give you direction on what kind of data quality rules you may want to run. So if I'm going through this profile and I start to see anything that is a bit of an anomaly, the detected type is not what I expect, or the values and distribution are not in line with what I would expect, I can get inspiration for maybe the kinds of data quality rules I want to run. After I've done a profile on the data, then I can actually configure the rules that I would like to run. So as I had mentioned, there is a set of out-of-the-box rules. We have duplication checks, empty blank field checks, unique value check, data type match, string format match, table lookup, which is looking to see if columns in one table match columns in another, for making sure that nothing happened, nothing adverse happened on any data transformations. And then the custom rules will put you into a visual, an expression builder that you can leverage here. Today, I believe this is using Azure Data Factory language, but we're also adding support for Python and SQL here as well. So you can define the rules in those languages, or the other idea being that you'll be able to just import data quality rules that you might have from other tools. You'll also see here, same thing, these are both in preview today, but you can get AI-powered recommendations on what rules you should run on your data assets. Once I've set up those rules, then I can manage my data quality scans. So you can run a one-off scan even from within the asset where we just were. You may have seen that you can run a one-off scan, but you can also set up scheduled scans and can scope that to any set of data products, data assets that you would like. So I can select all the data assets within a data product, or I can just select a particular data assets depending on how I want to scope this scan, what I am ready to measure data quality on. And then you can run this once, or more often you may set up a recurring scheduled scan, and you can do this monthly, weekly, daily, or even hourly, although I don't necessarily recommend that. And so then you can schedule those scans. Once I've scheduled my scans and set up recurring scans, then I can also configure alerts. And this is kind of thresholds for a certain subset of data that I want to ensure that the data quality stays above a certain area. And if it drops below that, then I will want someone to be notified. So here I'll set my threshold for if the data drops below 80, and I can input an actual recipient to get notified when the data quality drops below a certain amount. And again, I can scope this to data products or individual data assets within the data products, and then can review. Once I've set up those alerts, that information will then be available in actions. So from the actions dashboard, I'll see all the different alerts associated with data quality falling below a certain level. And as I click into these, I'll get a little bit more information about what happened, queries I can run on the data source to give me more information about how I might go about remediating this. Last thing I want to show you folks really quickly, and then I want to make sure there's time for questions as well. But in reports, we have an overall look at data quality. So there we were looking at kind of data quality for specific alerts and actions, but especially if I'm part of the central data office, if I want to get an overall look at the data quality health across my organization and across different dimensions like completeness, uniqueness, consistency, I can do that here. And if I want to investigate anything, I can filter down by governance domain, can filter down by even different data products and by data product status as well. I probably have a different standard for those published data products that are available to data consumers than for the draft data products. So I can break that out as well. In details, I'll see a view of every single pass-fail record for data quality rules that have been run in my organization. And then I can also view historical trend information for the last 13 months to see how my organization is trending with data quality. Other high-level reports we have are also the data governance report. So we have a set of out-of-the-box controls that we have to measure how you're doing with data estate health overall and how you're doing with the practice of data governance in your organization. And you can tweak those and configure new ones based on the needs of your organization. But then we have this data governance overview report, which tells you how your organization is progressing on the journey of data governance. So a breakdown across these different dimensions of access and use, discoverability, estate curation, trusted data. And you can again break it down by governance domain, as well as drill into specific data products. And you also have this heat map where you can see where are certain governance domains performing well, and where do certain governance domains maybe need a little bit of help, and is there an opportunity for some of that best practice sharing. Another thing that I don't think we'll have time to cover today is in health management, we have what's called data observability, which is a highly configurable view of the different data assets and data products throughout your organization. So this is just a really quick view of it. And here you'll actually be able to view the lineage of how different data products and data assets relate in your organization and have in context information like the data quality of given data assets. So you can see where maybe data quality is breaking down on a certain data pipeline and be able to root cause some of those issues. So a number of tools there in the health management section to monitor the overall health of your data estate and establish trust. So that was kind of your crash course tour around the unified catalog. I want to just hop back into slides today because I know that was a lot of information. But kind of if you're looking to get started with next steps, we have all our documentation publicly available. I believe these slides will be shared afterwards so you can see where to kind of get started on the documentation. And then if you want a little bit more information about just kind of the framing of how we think about data governance today at Microsoft, we have this blog from about a year ago when we put out our new solution that really frames how we're thinking about the future of data governance and how essential it is to organizations. And then we make our roadmap publicly available. Actually, if you go to documentation, you'll then see links to the roadmap, but we'll also link that directly here as well. And you'll see today that it is our H1 roadmap. We're actually likely this week about to put out an H2 update. And so you'll see kind of our key investment areas and priorities for the next 6 months. And then I mentioned kind of within the console, we have those click-through tutorials. You can also get just a high-level click-through tutorial as well through this, this link here, if you want to just get back into the solution and get a general sense of where everything is. So that's what I have for you. I'll throw it back to Mark, and then I think we're going to jump into questions as well.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Liz. Really good to see Purview in action. As I say, it's a side of Purview that a lot of organisations perhaps don't always look at or haven't considered, because it is different to what the rest of Purview offers. But it's really good to see it in action there. I'm just going to quickly say before we go into ask questions, etc., is that I'm not sure. Yes, it's showing. In terms of next steps here, I mean, it's great that the slides are going to be sent out. We've got those links that Liz has applied there, so you've got available. You can go off and have a look at the various documentation and say the roadmap to see what's coming and get a bit more of a tutorial around how some of these things get set up. But if you are looking to have a bit more of a talk with someone about this, and you want to get some more advice in terms of what could be done with not just in data governance side of things, but the other areas of Purview as well around data security and risk and compliance, then feel free to get in touch with us here at Coacho to book a securing data discovery call where we offer a 1 hour call with an experienced architect like myself or one of my colleagues to give some of that advice and to hear find out what you're after, what you're looking at, what your concerns are, what sort of things you're trying to do, the challenges you're facing, and it will give you an opportunity to find out, what Coacho may well be able to do to help, but also what other potential Microsoft-funded workshops might be available for you, that you might be eligible for to run through some of these scenarios or to look at, what sort of challenges you might have in your organization and within your environment, and where Purview could help. And certainly we can help with deploying or adopting various Purview technologies. So with that, it's time to look at any questions, and there are a couple of questions in the Q&A, one of which I did try and answer. I'm just going to quickly go to. First of all, I will say, sorry to those who experienced some connectivity or audio problems. I'm hoping they got resolved by either you rejoining or maybe it was just a temporary thing. We didn't notice anything while we were doing it. I know Liz was merrily talking away and I could hear her loud and clear, but that's my experience. I didn't hear anything from one of my other colleagues who's on the call as well in the background. So as far as I'm aware, it's not a common issue. So I hope the recording will be available to you soon. You'll be able to play back that and see anything that you may have missed. But we do have a couple of questions. The first one was from Lewis around if you ask Copilot questions on here, is it limited to the scope of your documents data, or does it get answers from the broader internet? Now, I did try and answer this, Liz, while you were speaking. I know Copilot within the Purview portal can do a range of things in terms of bringing back information about, say, DLP alerts or any investigations that may be coming from that side from within, say, Unified Catalog and Data Map. Yes, it can also bring sort of insights about your data assets or pull various recommendations or guide you towards various products, etc. But in terms of going off to the internet, I suspect it can do, depending on really on what your prompt is. But I don't think it's limited to not do that. Is that right, Liz?
Yeah, that's right. And I know as I was going through the demo, I kind of just highlighted, a couple use cases of the AI powered intelligent recommendations. Some of those are through Copilot, some of them actually are through some kind of other AI capabilities. And so I know I kind of highlighted, creating glossary terms, creating data quality rules. A lot of that will be, when it's those kinds of prompts, those will be generally looking at kind of information of your own data estate. But also a key use case that I maybe should have highlighted on the overview page is you always are going to have that Copilot sidecar experience too. So a great thing that I see organizations do is when they're looking to get started, they just open up that sidecar chat experience and say, give me the top 5 steps to help me get started with my journey of data governance. And that will definitely pull from the web as well. And with all our Copilot experiences, we build in some prioritization there to ensure that you're leveraging credible sources. So definitely our documentation is going to be one of the top sources that it's leveraging to get a lot of that information. But there's a lot of great tips out there as well on GitHub, blogs that share information about how to get started with data governance with Purview. So also we'll pull in some of that information as well where it's appropriate. So yeah, I think spot on, Mark. Depends on the prompt, but does some of both.
Absolutely. I mean, it's good to be able to get that extra information, especially when you are, I guess, as the central office is trying to determine, what are the domains we should be creating, what are these, getting those policies in place that are then flow down to the rest of the users in terms of how they're then using that. So yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. The other question we've got, and is just the one at the moment, is from Alice around how do you quantify data quality levels? So what are the criteria for 30, 40, 70, 80, etc.? How do you do that within the tool? I presume there's a bit of a technical question here.
Yeah, absolutely. So those scores, you can kind of think of those as it's out of 100. And so it's about all the rules that you've configured and how those rules, if they have passes or failures on the different records in your data assets. And then from that standpoint, it's just a percentage. So if it was 100, every single record has passed 100%, has passed every single rule that you've configured. But if it's 80, then for all the rules you've configured across all these different records, 80% of them failed, or 80% of them passed rather, and 20% of them failed. So that's how you can think about that.
Fantastic, thank you. There aren't any other questions at the moment in the chat. If anyone wants to add one, feel free to quickly add one now. The only other thing I think I wanted to ask while people are thinking about that question is just around the licensing, or the how you actually pay for this, because it is different from the rest of Purview. It's not included within a Microsoft 365 suite, for example, like the rest of Purview is, like the 365 side of things. Can you just give us a very quick summary of how this is actually paid for?
Yeah, you can actually think about it kind of similarly to the other parts of Purview. So kind of at a base level, Purview is licensed through those M365 licensing packages. E3 and E5 are the most common ones. And then on top of that, you have pay-as-you-go structure, a consumptive pricing model, because data governance is a really kind of resource-intensive process, but we also don't want to charge you for things that you're not using as well. So kind of in the past, a couple of years ago, we used to charge you based on how much scanning you were doing of your data estate. And what we realized is, we want to let people scan their entire data estates, but they're usually only actually governing a portion of that data estate. So what we did was we stopped charging for scanning. So you can scan as much as you want, onboard all the data that you have. And where charges start to come in is in 2 main areas. One, it's number of unique governed assets you have. And so an asset becomes governed when it's attached to a business concept. So mainly that means when I decide that I want to add a data asset to a data product, that makes it governed. The same is true if I define a critical data element that maps to an asset, then it's governed. Generally, this is different for every organization, but usually you should be governing only about 10 to 20% of your data estate. The other place where a consumptive pricing model will incur is what we call data governance processing units. And this is if you're running data quality rules as well as data estate health controls. So again, these are kind of resource intensive processes. We do kind of full scans of the data when we run data quality, for example. So again, you'll want to be kind of choosy about where you want to measure your data quality. It's usually actually same as those governed assets. It's the data that you want to make consumable is also where you want to measure your data quality. And so there is pricing that incurs there. On the exact numbers, I would say kind of talk to your reseller or account reps, because these will vary slightly, based on region and industry as well. But we also have a pricing calculator now available in the Azure pricing calculator. You can add Purview, and that will help you forecast some of the charges. Then when you do incur charges, we also now within the settings portion of Unified Catalog have a consumption transparency report. So you'll be able to see, okay, what charges relate to the number of governed assets, what charges relate to those data governance processing units from running data quality, and also what governance domain is responsible for those charges. So if you do have a model of apportioning out these charges and chargeback for your organization, you can do that as well.
Fantastic, thanks, Liz. So we do have one more question coming. It's related actually a bit to the original Copilot question. It's how do you make sure the Copilot prompts are protected from sensitive info being leaked then? And that may actually cover from more of other areas of Purview rather than the data governance side of things, because there is things you can obviously do within Purview to say, we are protecting in terms of what sensitive information you're allowed to put in prompts. Is there anything more I need to say there, Liz? I think it is more other areas of Purview that are actually going to provide that control.
No, there's a lot of things to say on this question actually. In terms of just kind of asking sensitive information to to Copilot. I mean, first off, we recommend organizations to kind of train their users on not inputting sensitive information into any AI agent, including Copilot. But of course, that can be easier said than done. But in terms of if you use the Copilot within Microsoft Purview, that information is not, that's all confined to your tenant. That information doesn't now become publicly available. So you can feel kind of secure using Microsoft Copilot. So I'll call that out. But then the other piece is actually securing and governing AI apps and agents across kind of the entire ecosystem of, Microsoft solutions in terms of Copilots, any kind of homegrown, custom-built AI applications through something like Azure AI Foundry, and then that whole suite of AI apps and websites that are available out there today. We actually have a set of solutions to secure and govern that through those data security and data compliance pieces of Purview. So this actually all comes together in something that's called data security posture management for AI. And you'll be able to ensure, that when users put in sensitive information to a prompt, either that's blocked, or if users are trying to, get the Copilot to share sensitive information with them, that's blocked. And then also if there is sensitive information happening within, within a chat of Copilot, and like I said, that's protected, that will stay within your tenant. But that conversation will inherit a sensitivity label. So that won't, if there is confidential information that maybe the user, the prompter was able to access, but somebody else in the organization shouldn't, that will be protected then. So that's probably a whole nother session, but just a quick preview on that there is a set of solutions around that in Purview as well.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned DSPM for AI, yeah, because that's a great tool for observing what's going on. One final question we got from James here. Does adding a glossary term to a data asset also make it governed?
Yeah, so today you actually only apply glossary terms at the data product level. So that wouldn't really happen. On our kind of, if you're on our classic solution, there you could apply glossary terms to data assets. And so if you're on the classic solution, you're probably on the old billing model. So kind of everything that I just mentioned would be a little different anyway. We are in the future looking to kind of unify the new glossary and the classic glossary. So I don't know in terms of billing implications for that. I'm not sure if they're finalized yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so there's no other questions at the minute. Obviously, if there's anything else you do want to ask in the future, then please drop us a line. Just leaves me to say thanks very much, Liz, for your demo today and your slides. It's been really interesting to see that, and thanks for taking the time to answer the questions. If you have any other questions for us, please drop us a line. If you're interested in a pre-sales call around securing data, then obviously reach out to Cocho as well. Details will be within the slide or within whatever we share later on this week once it all becomes available. Thank you very much for attending. I hope it's been interesting, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.